Good morning. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the virtual service of Buckman Bridge Unitarian Universalist Church. My name is Jennifer. My pronouns are she and her. I found BBUUC more than 20 years ago while seeking a church home that would support my quest for understanding the various yet universal truths that surround us. Perhaps you can tell from our name that our church has a kind of combined theology. The Unitarians taught that there is one God, one source, and because we all come from that one source, we are inextricably bound together, with our lives as our only true test of faith. The Universalists taught us that God loves everyone, so we must take care of each other. We must love our neighbors and help strangers, for love is what lifts up all of us. For more information about our faith, please visit uua.org. Staying connected is just as important these days as staying physically apart. So we will continue to offer virtual worship until we can meet once again in person in our church sanctuary. In addition to worship, we are continuing our other opportunities for connection: classes, small group ministries, children's chapel, parent groups, and coffee conversations, all through the magic of internet and Zoom. Check in regularly with the BBUUC website and our Facebook page for more information on the ways we can keep our inner fires burning bright while we tend the flame from afar. If you are new to Unitarian Universalism, be sure to come back and watch next week's service. You should watch last week's service too. While our messages of hope, love, compassion, and service are consistent, our services are as diverse as our theological background. We enjoy a wide array of sermons, philosophical queries, poems, readings, songs, and music in our services. The Chalice lighting is this month's Global Chalice Lighting. The words, slightly adapted, were written by Reverend Steve Dick, former executive director of the ICUU. They are offered here in honor of his life and his passionate dedication to our global faith community. The light of the sun does not lift the shadows that have fallen on humanity the world over. We relight our chalice flame to reignite a spirit of radical optimism, knowing it takes us all living what matters to dispel those who would divide us. All manner of things will be well if we make them well. May our free religious communities embody the right relationships our world so desperately needs.
Greetings. I am Reverend Amy Moses Lagos, and it is my privilege to serve as the minister at Buckman Bridge Unitarian Universalist Church. The opening words this morning are entitled Being Sanctuary, and they are written by Jennifer Jo Von Roo and Lynette Lowe. Welcome to this space, this sanctuary of peace where we come to not only create our best selves, but to also do the work of creating a beloved community. We come together today as individuals, much like individual pieces of glass or pottery that are different shapes, sizes, and colors, all of which are broken with imperfect, jagged edges, but always beautiful. While our pieces may not always fit neatly together, it is within this sanctuary, guided by our principles, that we gather together to create a beautiful mosaic. May the brokenness and beauty you find in one another create peace in this space and fill our hearts with love as we create worship together.
Hello, welcome to the Wonder Box. I wonder what could be in our story box today. Let's see. What do you think these are? Did you guess garden tools? These are really cool. I've been working in my garden a lot lately. Let me share a story that happened in the garden with you called Sometimes You're a Caterpillar and Sometimes You're a Snail. And it's written by Chalice. So in the garden, there's a caterpillar and a snail, and they're best friends. They hang out together 24/7. They do dinner together, they have movie nights, they love to craft together, and they're really into cosplay, on top of whatever else caterpillars and snails do, like eating leaves or something. Anyway, one day they're on their way to a party that's right outside the garden, and they have to go through the fence to get there. So the caterpillar goes right through, but the snail is stuck. Her shell is just too big and it won't fit under the wire. So she's like, darn, I can't get through. Maybe can you lift the wire, or maybe can we build a little bridge or something? And the caterpillar's like, dude, just go under. But she can't. There's just no way that the shell is going to fit. The caterpillar is like, go under already. Come on. We're going to be late and I'm trying to hook up with that super cute ladybug. But it's not happening. The shell will not fit under the wire. And at this point, Snail's getting a little frustrated because it's not like she doesn't want to go to the party, but for some reason, Caterpillar just isn't getting it. Yeah, it's not that easy for me. I just can't crawl under the fence like you can. So I would really appreciate your help here. Maybe we can go a different way. And this just sets Caterpillar off. What the heck? Just because I can crawl under stuff doesn't mean that I have it easy. Do you even know what it's like to have 16 feet? No, you don't, because finding shoes is a complete nightmare. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm not saying you have it easy. I'm just saying I can't go under the fence because of my shell. That's all. I have a shell and you don't. And there's some stuff that's easier for you that's harder for me. Just like I don't know jack about finding shoes because, well, I don't have feet. Caterpillar stops and thinks about this for a second and realizes the snail's right. He's never had to think about shells or slimy trails, and that's a privilege that the snail has never had because she has to think about that stuff all the time. That's part of being a snail. And it's kind of like that for everyone, right? I mean, we all have our own struggles and challenges. Some of them are small and some of them are huge and really unfair and beyond our control. And a lot of time, it can be hard to see what someone else deals with because you've never been in their shoes or in their shell. Maybe you're gay or trans, disabled, or a different religion. Or, of course, the obvious one, you're a member of a different race. I don't know what it's like to be you, and you don't know what it's like to be me. So it's really important to stop and try and see the other side so we can help each other overcome those obstacles together. It's like sometimes you're the snail and sometimes you're the caterpillar. Eventually, the snail and the caterpillar figured it out. They went to the other side of the garden. They could get through a little break that was in the fence. And while it took a little longer to get to the party, they did the trip together, which is what made it so great. So they get to the party, and well, the caterpillar hooked up with the ladybug, and Snail taught everyone how to do the wobble. And the party was everything. The end. I wonder, in listening to this story, which UU principles did you hear? And with this, our story is told. Until the next time.
Today, we are grateful for many things. Here in community, we call them to mind and speak aloud some of the things that bring us joy, as well as the concerns and sorrows for loved ones and friends that we hold dear. We light a flame for Terry Kay, who hopes to be able to travel to visit with her grandson for his birthday this year and appreciates your prayers and good wishes for her health. We light a candle of joy for Morgan J., who celebrated his 25th birthday on the 9th. It was a true celebration of life, filled with gratitude to all the doctors, nurses, friends, and family who have been there along the way. We light flames for marriage milestones in our congregation this week. The first for David and Susanna S., who celebrate their wedding anniversary on April 13th. Another flame for Ev and Michelle C., whose anniversary is on the 14th. And a final anniversary for Annabelle and Michael B., who celebrate their anniversary on April 16th. We light one final candle for all those joys and concerns that remain unspoken. For the joys shared, we join you in celebration. For the sorrows and concerns spoken here, may you feel our sympathy and compassion. For all that remains unspoken, both joy and sorrow, may the caring of our community offer you both kindness and hope.
Hear the wind of change. 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 You can feel the wind of change. The healing wind of change. See, we can see the wind of change. We can be the wind of change.
Each Sunday, our congregation collects an offering. The virtual donations to our worship service offertory will be directed this month to support the St. John's Riverkeeper. The mission of the St. John's Riverkeeper is to defend the St. John's River and to advocate for its protection. It is a 501c3, privately funded, independent, and trusted voice for the St. John's River and the public to whom it belongs. The vision is to have a thriving St. John's River watershed that sustains healthy ecosystems for future generations. Their work as an independent voice for the river is made possible by financial support from you and hundreds of other concerned citizens. To add to today's virtual plate, find the link to our PayPal giving fund on our YouTube channel and give whatever you are able. It will be gratefully received. You can also visit our webpage, bbuuc.org, and click the donate link in the upper right-hand corner. Thank you for all you're willing to give.
In the fall of 2008, I enrolled as a seminary student at Star King School for the Ministry in Berkeley, California. At that time, every new student at Star King was required to take a course called Educating to Counter Oppressions and Create Just and Sustainable Communities. In that course, my classmates, teachers, and I explored how spirituality, ministry, and religious activism might respond to the multiple intersecting realities of injustice, suffering, and oppression in our lives and in our world. We explored how we might deepen our spiritual commitments to dismantling all forms of oppression and to build beloved community together. The Unitarian Universalist Leadership Council describes beloved community in this way: a place where all souls are welcomed as blessings and the human family lives whole and reconciled. In the book, Unitarian Universalists of Color, Stories of Struggle, Courage, Love, and Faith, Yuri Yamamoto writes, "To me, a beloved community means a sanctuary where all of us can express ourselves authentically and celebrate who we are without the fear of rejection." In this course at Star King, for the first time, I learned about the idea of countering intersecting oppressions. I had certainly heard about racism, sexism, classism, and other forms of prejudice and discrimination based on aspects of identity. But I had never encountered a comprehensive framework for understanding how these forms of discrimination overlapped for people based on their specific identity. I also hadn't thought very much about how the flip side of oppression is privilege. Sexism is a form of oppression. Male privilege is the flip side of sexism. Racism is a form of oppression based on race. White privilege is the flip side of racism. Building a beloved community in which all people are welcome requires those of us who hold privilege to work to end the harm caused by oppression in our communities and our society. I learned how individuals carry aspects of privilege and aspects of marginalization in their identities. I learned how I myself carry aspects of privileged and marginalized identities in my own life experience. I personally carry almost exclusively privileged identities. I am white, I am in the upper economic class, I am straight, able-bodied, I am cisgender, meaning I am not transgender. I am a woman, and therefore I have to navigate systems of sexism in the world. Discussions about oppression tend to focus on race, gender, class, sexual orientation, and disability. But there are many, many aspects of our identities which shape how we navigate privilege and oppression in the world. For example, tall people have privilege. A survey of Fortune 500 CEOs, most of whom are men, showed that 30% of them were 6 feet 2 inches or taller. And in the general population, only 3.9% of men are this height or taller. What I learned in my class at Star King was that oppression, which is harmful to life, impacts those who are victims of that oppression, those who are perpetrators, and those who benefit from the oppression. It impacts all of us because we are all part of a sacred, interconnected web of life. Racism, heterosexism, ableism, classism, and other forms of oppression impact all of us. And we all need to liberate ourselves from these harmful belief systems. Although the class explored many aspects of identity related to privilege and oppression, the truth is that the conversations about race and racism were the hardest ones to have. Before coming to Star King, I hadn't thought about having white privilege. I didn't identify as anti-racist. I did identify as someone who was committed to social justice. I had been working on the issue of immigration justice for many years on behalf of low-income Latinx immigrants. But even so, I didn't have many conversations about race. I didn't think about how my white privilege might impact the people of color that I worked with. I didn't think about myself in racial terms. I just thought of myself as being human. My experience is typical of progressive white people in the United States. The scholar Robin DiAngelo notes that white people in the United States are not taught to see themselves in racial terms or to draw attention to race in any way. In her book, entitled White Fragility, Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism, she writes, "Nothing in mainstream US culture gives us, white people, the information we need to have the nuanced understanding of arguably the most complex and enduring social dynamic of the last several hundred years. For example, I can be seen as qualified to lead a major or minor organization in this country with no understanding whatsoever of the perspectives or experiences of people of color, and virtually no ability to engage critically with the topic of race. I can get through graduate school without ever discussing racism. I can graduate from law school without ever discussing race." End of quote. The impact of white people not thinking about race or learning about race is that the status quo of whites receiving privileges and benefits that people of color do not receive in society is preserved. Black, Indigenous people of color do not have the luxury of not thinking about their race on a daily basis. They need to think about race in order to navigate life in the United States. Ijoma Oluo is the author of the book, So You Want to Talk About Race, and she's a Seattle resident. Here's what she writes in the opening chapter of her book. As a Black woman, race has always been a part of my life. I have never been able to escape the fact that I am a Black woman in a white supremacist country. My Blackness is woven into how I dress each morning, what bars I feel comfortable going to, what music I enjoy, what neighborhoods I hang out in. End of quote. In our class at Star King, we read an essay that is used widely to explain the idea of white privilege. In this essay, the white anti-racism activist Peggy McIntosh writes about the invisible backpack of white privilege. She explains, I have come to see white privilege as an invisible package of unearned assets that I can count on cashing in each day, but about which I was meant to remain oblivious. She notes that as a white person, she can count on certain things in our society that people of color cannot take for granted. She gives the following examples. I can turn on the television or open to the front page of the newspaper and see people of my race widely represented. I can go shopping alone most of the time, pretty well assured that I will not be followed or harassed. I do not have to educate my white children to be aware of systemic racism for their own daily physical protection. In my class at Star King, I really struggled with the idea that I had white privilege and had received unfair advantages in my life. I hadn't asked for these advantages. I felt uncomfortable and anxious as we read about and discussed these ideas. Our class was taught by Reverend Dr. Rebecca Parker, who was the president of Star King at the time. Dr. Parker is in dual fellowship with the Unitarian Universalist Association and the United Methodist Church. One day in class, Dr. Parker invited us to share how we felt about the work we were doing together. I shared that I felt uncomfortable and anxious. I found the courage to ask the question that was really on my heart. Was whiteness a sin? And did I need to atone for the sin of whiteness? I will always remember what happened next. Dr. Parker said, it sounds like you're experiencing feelings of guilt. Oh no, I said. I know I shouldn't be feeling guilt because it's self-indulgent and it gets in the way of doing the important work of anti-racism. And Dr. Parker said, so you feel guilty about feeling guilty? And I said, yes. Everyone in the class laughed, myself included. Yes, I had feelings of guilt arising during our discussions, but I had also heard, which is something you hear in the work of anti-racism, that I wasn't supposed to be feeling guilty. So I suppressed my emotions and tried to move forward without acknowledging them and without working through them. And that didn't go well. When I was honestly able to share my feelings and move through them, that allowed me to move forward in my learning journey. I didn't know it at the time, but it turns out the feelings I experienced of anxiety and discomfort and guilt were a symptom of what Robin DiAngelo calls white fragility. She writes this: white fragility is a state in which even a minimum amount of racial stress becomes intolerable, triggering a range of defensive moves. These moves include the outward display of emotions such as anger, fear, and guilt, and behaviors such as argumentation, silence, and leaving the stress-inducing situation. These behaviors in turn function to reinstate white racial equilibrium. End of quote. White people are not experienced with having conversations about race. and having these conversations brings up difficult emotions. I was so lucky and I'm so grateful that Dr. Parker and the other teachers in our class were so skilled in creating a container where I could be honest about the discomfort I was feeling and work through it. They spoke truth with love. They shared hard truths about racism in the United States, and they said it with love. That enabled me to stay in the room and hear those lessons and grow in my understanding of anti-racism work. Other white students in the class were patient and understanding with me as I asked questions, struggling to understand the material we were learning. Because of this learning opportunity, I was able to embrace a new identity of being a white ally in the work of racial justice. I believe that for white individuals, the work of anti-racism work is deep spiritual work. And although it is hard, it leads to greater healing and wholeness. I see that racism harms me because it stifles my knowledge of the true history of the United States. It causes me to be unaware of the daily experiences of Black, Indigenous people of color in the United States. It causes me to act in ways that harm others without even being aware of it. Dismantling racism, being an ally for racial justice, pulls me to learn about the true history of the United States. It pulls me to learn about the daily violence and microaggressions faced by Black, Indigenous people of color. It enables me to act in ways that dismantle racism rather than perpetuating it. And acknowledging my part in the system of racism and acknowledging that I receive benefits and advantages because of my race leads me on a path towards healing and wholeness. I learn about harm done to people of color, and I can put my energy into stopping that harm. I can put my time and energy into building beloved community. Here's how Robin DiAngelo describes the work: engaging in ongoing self-awareness, continuing education, relationship building, and actual anti-racist practice. It is a journey that has challenges and it is painful at times. It also has a lot of joy. I am grateful to be on the journey. I don't consider myself to be an expert in this area. For those of us who are white, we will never arrive. We will never be in the category of white folks who really get it. I still make mistakes. The important thing for me is to be open to getting feedback about the mistakes that I make and to strive to learn from them, to grow in my work as an ally for racial justice. Building beloved community is sacred work that calls all of us to dismantle the forces of oppression in our communities and in our society. It includes the internal work of examining the areas in our lives where we hold privilege and the work of challenging our own prejudices. It includes the external work of working for a more just and fair society. Building beloved community together allows people with marginalized identities to feel more welcome and more accepted in Unitarian Universalist congregations. It allows people with privileged identities the opportunity to more truly live out our deepest values in our everyday interactions. It allows all of us to come together to engage in the work of dismantling oppressive systems and policies in our communities. There are forces in society of racism, sexism, ableism, heterosexism, classism, and more that cause harm to our sacred, interdependent web of life. It is painful and heartbreaking to face these realities. But when we face them as a community, we can begin to repair our hearts and create spaces where each person feels free to be their own authentic self. We can find ways of being in community that are welcoming of all people and support all people in their searches for truth and meaning. we can repair our sacred, interconnected, interdependent web of all life. Together, we can build the beloved community.
There is always a light. When we're ready to see it, there is always a light. When we're ready to be it, to see the light, to be the light, to raise our eyes in the dark of night, to climb this hill, together we will.
There is always
a light. There is always a light.
There is always a
When we're ready to see it, there is always a light.
There is always a
When we're ready to be it, to see the light, to be the light, to raise our eyes in the dark of night, to climb this hill, together we will.
There is always
Shine,
There is always
when we're ready to see it, shine,
There is always
when we're ready to be it, to see the light, to be the light, to raise our eyes in the dark of night, to climb this hill, together we will.
There is always
Shine your light in the darkness. Shine your light in the darkness.
to see the light,
Let
to
your
be the light, to
bright
raise our eyes in the dark of
burn
night,
and be
to
a
climb this hill.
in
Together
the
we will.
world.
Shine your light in the darkness. Shine your light in the darkness. Let your bright heart burn out loud. Be a gift in the world.
Our closing words this morning are a prayer written for living in tension by Joseph M. Cherry. If we have any hope of transforming the world and changing ourselves, we must be bold enough to step into our discomfort, brave enough to be clumsy there, loving enough to forgive ourselves and others. May we, as a people of faith, be granted the strength to be so bold, so brave, and so loving. Thank you for joining us this morning. I hope you have a wonderful week. Go now in peace. Blessed be. Namaste.